The following podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be misconstrued as therapy, advice, consultation, or anything else other than simply something fun for you to listen to in the car or while you run. Let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Kirk. Welcome to Healing, Helping, Hoping with Kirk Shepard and Friends. Today's friend is a dear one. One of my favorite people in the world, April Lamoreaux, is here today talking about transitions. April has experienced some losses, and she'll talk about that. And she then took those losses, kind of reshaped her whole life, moved 3 states away, and has begun a quest for her Ph.D., which I'm very, very excited for. April's one of my former students and somebody who I looked up to while I supervised because she was so smart, so kind, and one of the nicest people in the world. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope that you find this conversation inspiring, and let me know what you think. If you would be so kind and want to join the Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/KirkShepardWriter. If you're a current counseling client or someone who I've seen in the last 5 years, please do not do that. Otherwise, if you'd like to support this broadcast, please do so. Check out KirkShepard.com as well and enjoy this conversation with April. We're going to jump right in with us talking about how we met.
I think originally you just stopped by and you were, just funny and great to talk with, and you would come into the office and we would chit chat some. And then I think at that next semester is when you actually started supervising. And then I talked
tricked
you
him into letting me do that.
and then I talked you into supervising me.
It was an easy sell. And that took about 22 years. And then,
yeah, exactly.
Thank you. And part of the reason the school doesn't exist anymore, frankly, is because they paid me so much for that supervision. Let's be honest.
Because it took too daggone long.
But you were busy, so it's fine. And you were low maintenance. It was the easiest money I ever made. So I was just listening to Amy Grant's Tennessee Christmas song today, thinking of you and your new life.
Yes.
Where are you at now?
We are in Laverne, Tennessee, which is just 30 minutes outside of Nashville.
Oh, how fun.
So not far from downtown at all. And that's where my school is. So that's one of the reasons we picked the area. Yeah.
Well, I love to talk to people about all things mental health. I think that will be really interesting to hear kind of your journey into the new career and education path that you're taking. Not really a new career, just a next step in your career. But I also like to have people tell me kind of how they got where they are. So if you could just tell folks a little bit about your journey into the world of mental health and how you got where you're at.
Yeah. So I was actually helping a friend. She was really struggling with a relationship she was in, her mom and her both actually, and just sought my help. We talked through a lot of things and really just helped them through that. And that's really how I got interested in counseling. I was an education major at the time, thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher. And when I got through that process with them, they both said to me, you're supposed to be a counselor. And I really felt like, a door started to open for me, and it was the right fit. It was the right thing for me to do. But I think that actually helped shape the journey that I ended up on, because I, had opportunity at the school I was at to have just a different experience than just counseling, being able to work in the office first as an intern, being seen for, gifts that I had, and them actually helping me develop those as well. I think brought me to definitely where I am today as far as the step. Now, as far as this step, that's been a huge transition. And I know a lot of people, the world we live in right now is just full of transition. It has been for the last couple of years with the pandemic and everything. But to be honest with you, mine actually started a few years before that. So I went through a pretty big loss with my grandmother first, who was probably one of my central support systems. And then went through where I lost my house in a fire. So I lost everything I owned, in my home. Thankfully, no person was harmed. Very thankful for that.
Still a big deal, though.
Yeah, but it was another huge transition to go through, having your
Yeah.
home rebuilt and things like that. It looks so fun on all those home shows to pick everything out, but when you literally have to pick everything out, it's not as fun. So, but anyway, made it through that. It ended up being a huge blessing. But then, a few years ago, went through the situation where I worked, where a 95-year-old school decided to close down, which was a huge shock.
And you've been there how long? I mean, you started there as a student. You worked in the counseling center as the office person,
Yeah,
and became the clinical coordinator. I mean, eventually, started running the place. Really?
yeah, I was. If you count school and work, I was there 17 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a good part of my story, a good part of my life. But when the school did close, you reach a point in life sometimes where you just have to start thinking about things that maybe you hadn't thought about before. And transitions become more movement, not just here's this thought process, but I may actually have to redefine some things. And that's where I ended up. The year of the pandemic, I spent a lot of time rebuilding myself, just emotionally, and spiritually, mentally. Some people probably think this is odd, but my husband and I would take our dogs actually and go to the campus where I worked, and we walked that whole campus days upon days.
And this is way after it closed.
Yes, this is way after it closed. And we did this honestly for almost the whole pandemic year, even in the winter, through every season. Dogs still need walk. They still want to go for a walk. So it was a very reflecting time, just very thought driven for me, processing times that I'd spent there with people, processing good times, processing grief, the loss. There were times that I honestly would just stand kind of in the middle of the quad and just bawl. Look around and bawl at everything and everybody that was supposed to be there. Everybody that was supposed to be there. It's funny because I wasn't the only one. I ran into so many people over the year.
I still see people posting on Facebook now that live nearby that are keeping track of what's going on with construction.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was again, though, I think a really important part of my story. I think I would encourage people. I had been through multiple losses, so I think I needed that space to heal. But I would encourage people, if you've been through something like that or been through something that's been very traumatic, give yourself some time. Yeah. It really makes you better equipped down the road.
Basically, you had this full-time job that you loved and were good at, and it had finally gotten to the point where you were pretty much in charge of the way things ran, and then it had it completely taken away. And it wasn't completely unexpected. We knew for many years that things weren't going to be good. But still, the way it is handled, and I happened to be there the day it was announced as well, was not, it was shocking. It was shockingly cold, and it was shocking just in the timing of it and the speed of which it happened. And so it was a major loss. And so that definitely turns you on your ear, and I get why you needed that time to heal and space to grieve.
Yeah.
And so then,
and you factor in those other losses that I've told you about, and I just really was at a point that I needed some space, Yeah. And ironically, it was funny, when I worked there, I didn't spend much time outside,
right?
So it was almost a rediscovering of the campus too, just through the change of seasons and things like that. But it really took me on a journey of being able to start to discover, okay, what is my next step? Mm-hmm. I am forced into transition again. First I had the transition of living without my grandmother, had the transition of my house needing to be rebuilt. Now I'm forced into another transition of I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with my life. Because just like you just said, I loved my job.
Yeah.
I was so comfortable there. I was so what I felt
You were
like in my
great at
niche.
it. You got a lot of validation from it. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to be very affirming. You got to be around people all day and use the
Hmm.
extroversion in a real way in a job that maybe you can't always do as a counselor because it's such a individualized thing, one on one, a
Yes.
lot of times.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a major loss.
Yeah. I got to flourish in who I was,
Yeah,
really. And appreciated for it, which is rare. Not every place you go to does that,
right.
so it's a huge blessing. One of the things that I got the opportunity to do while I worked there was teach, and again, kind of going back to originally started out wanting to go into teaching, but never in my wildest dreams dreamed I'd teach as a professor in a master's program. And when I was given the opportunity and really just again undergirded by the people that I worked with and said, no, we see this in you. You can do this. And then taking that step in me really laid a foundation for when this transition came,
Yeah.
because it helped me to have a foundation to stand on to say, okay, I can do this. I need some other things to continue to do this, but this is where I really thrive. This is
Mhm.
where when you look at all the things that I did and the time that has passed, I'm appreciative of all the components that I was able to participate in. But this one is probably where I really feel like my gifting came out. Like equipping other counselors, encouraging them, helping them develop who they are as a counselor was what I wanted to do.
Hey, everybody, it's Kirk. I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about Anchor. That's the actual app that I use to make this podcast. If you haven't heard of it, it's really, really cool. Let me tell you about it. It's free, first of all, which is amazing. And it has certain creation tools built in that let you make and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. It'll distribute your podcast for you so you can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the other platforms. And you can make money from it with no minimum listenership. Like this ad right here that I'm recording for you to hear. It's going to make money for me, which is great. It's really everything you need in a podcast all in one place. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
I would just say to people, it's hard when you come up against a challenge and you look at it and it seems so big. When I first thought about going back to school, it seems enormous. Now that I'm starting to walk that step out, I'm not saying it doesn't feel still big at times, especially because of how it ends, the big dissertation piece. That's a big word. But it doesn't seem as big when you start walking in it. It's like you start looking at it in pieces and in moments and weeks and months, and it becomes a different journey.
You figured out how to chunk things out and make it
Yeah.
manageable in the stress, which I think is a
Yes.
big, big thing for people. When you start to, when you feel overwhelmed, it's because you're looking at the big picture instead of taking
Mm-hmm.
things one step or one item at a time, right? Even
Yeah.
cleaning your house. If you want to
Yeah.
clean your whole house, that's a big, big thing. But if you want to clean that counter in the kitchen, that might be
Yeah.
more doable. I think that's a thing people
Right.
might be able to take away from this is that sometimes you have to break things down into smaller chunks that you can swallow in order to tackle them. So what's the next step once you get done with school? You're working on how long does it take you to get through this program? First of all,
Takes 3 years.
okay, and you're in year one now.
Yeah, I'm in the first semester.
Okay, just started, so we got a
I'm
ways
the
to go.
baby in
All
it.
right, got a ways to go. And then
Yeah.
what's the long range vision? What's your plan? What's your hope? Do you know? Or are you just going to wait and see what happens? What do you think?
I will say this. I'm open to what that next step looks like, but I do have a vision for myself. I want to be on the beach somewhere.
Hmm.
I want to have a computer sitting on my lap and I'm teaching a class while I'm sitting looking at the ocean.
Hmm.
That's pretty much my goal.
That's a pretty good
So,
goal.
yeah. So I would really enjoy that being my step at some point. Now, how I get there, what that looks like, I think because of the things I've been through, I'm open enough to know that it might not actually go that way, but
Yeah.
that'll be okay. We'll figure it out. One of the things that I think I've learned about myself is a term that I've heard before, but became more alive to me, I think, in the last few months. One of my professors has been speaking it, and that's the word resilience. And I said, not to sound arrogant in any way, but it's like, really, that's what I had. When after my grandmother died, after my house burned down, after this job that I lost, I found a way to have resilience and to pick myself up and go to the next step. And even though the next step, most people would say, that's too big, it's too much. So, nah, it's not too much. It's
Yeah.
doable. Yeah.
For the folks listening who maybe are thinking about making a change, or maybe they have a goal or a vision or a dream and they've been afraid to try it, what would you say to them?
I would say don't let the fear hold you back. Almost embrace the fear, because it's normal to be fearful. And I think that's what people try to eliminate. You can't do it, it's going to be there. I'm still scared at times. I still sit down to write a paper and I'm terrified of how am I going to get these words that I need on this page. Do it scared, because it is a benefit. Just as something as simple as I wrote a paper yesterday in one day instead of it taking me 4, instead of it taking me 3. You'll see the progress in yourself if you push yourself and do it even when you're afraid. Know your support system too. I think one of the things that I've always been blessed with is a good support system. And when I was working, even jobs I had before
Well, let's
the
not
job.
forget that you lost this job before you lost this job and got it back thanks to
Yes.
people rallying around you. So
Yes.
speaking of support, you had people fighting for you saying we cannot do
Yes.
this without her. Basically, is what they
Right.
said.
Yes.
And they won. And they were
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a pretty high compliment. And I never felt like it was something that I couldn't live up to because I was so supported in it. I felt that, surrounded by people that really cared, really saw something in me that was worth protecting, worth making sure was, available to, in this case, the other students and things like that. I think that was one of the biggest things through each of those things that I went through was the transition of, okay, here's where my support comes from. Part of that's my faith. I'm a person of faith, but even the people that are in my life, I have a very supportive husband. I have a very supportive family. And just looking at that and realizing that can take me to the next step, to when I got to this step of, this is a step that's going to take me 3 states away from my main support system, but still feeling that support from them 3 states away.
Yeah.
That makes a huge difference when you're in something that does feel challenging and maybe even, like we talked about, fearful.
Yeah.
It's like it makes a huge difference in what you end up can accomplish. What you end up having be your outcome. So yeah, I would say that. The other thing that I have gotten so much better at, and I preached this for years, is my own self-care. Well, I think one of the things I realized as I was walking around the campus, I was like, April, you didn't even come out here for, 10 years. And, even the flowers and stuff, they're beautiful. You didn't even take the time to look at this stuff. It's like taking care of myself really started in the year of the pandemic, really understanding that I need to do something different. When we moved here, my husband and I told him before we came, I said, I want to join the Y because I want to be able to go to the pool every day, at least the majority of the week. And that's made a huge difference as well. I mean, we pretty faithfully go 6 days a week. We usually take about one day off just to give ourselves a break, let your body relax and stuff like that. And I love it. I mean, I have never loved exercise in my life. Let's just be honest. Hate it. But this has been again, helping me mentally, helping me emotionally, obviously helping me physically. We've got to meet some great people, hear these great stories about other people's lives already. It's only been a few months. But that has been a huge part, I think, of this journey for me too, is realizing how all this fits together.
I want to thank April for joining me. I want to thank you for listening as well. If you're interested in making a transition or a change in your life, don't be afraid. It'll be very rewarding. I hope this has been helpful to you today. Join me next time right here on Healing, Helping, and Hoping with Kirk Shepherd and Friends.